All right, you guys asked for it. You wanted to see some reflectors set up on my vertical panels because we have that big dip in the middle of the day, and maybe that'll help. Well, the sun has risen a little bit. It's due east, just a little over the horizon. It's still early in the morning, and I took a sneak peek at the data to see how it was coming. And if I wasn't running this test myself, I would not have believed the result. I did not expect to see dramatic improvement early in the morning. My goal was to improve things in the middle of the day. So I ran out and grabbed my irradiance meter to see what we were getting on the panels themselves. Off to the side, I'm getting a little over 800 watts per meter squared. And up high on the panel, I'm getting a little over 800 watts per meter squared. But the lower half is getting over 1,000 watts per meter squared. And the sun's still pretty low in the horizon. The result is these panels are putting out way more than they normally do. I'm really excited to see what happens here. Could this be the holy grail setup for solar panels? Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. Let's find out together. I installed these panels last fall just in time to catch the winter solstice. There's not a lot of racking solutions for vertically oriented panels yet, so I made my own. SWI Fence Company makes these aluminum I-beams that they use for fence posts by pounding them into the ground, and they were kind enough to give me a few to try out for my test fixture. These posts are narrow but strong, limiting the shading that the panels see from the mounting structure. I went with vertical orientation for these panels instead of two horizontal orientations because of the limited height of these posts. Even though I only pushed them a couple feet into the ground and we have had some very severe weather conditions, they've held up pretty well. Well, we're past the summer solstice, and before I get into the reflection results, I thought many of you would like an update. How have these performed over the first half of the year? So let's see how the summer results compare with the winter results and what you can expect to get for a year-round vertical solar panel system. If you didn't see my video on the winter results, I'll link to that somewhere up here and in the description and at the end of the video. If you haven't seen it, you should probably check that out before you watch this one. It'll make a little more sense. Now let me explain this chart from the winter results as a reminder of what each curve is. This chart shows the power output of these 395 watt panels at each hour of the day. You see two typical performance curves. The top blue parabola is an average of the bifacial panels mounted at 30 degrees on the main array. The orange parabola right below it is the standard panels on the main array, and they're slightly underperforming the bifacial panels, which is what you would expect to see if you've watched my other videos on the back-to-back performance. Then, the more interesting green and light blue curves are the vertical east-west facing panels. Right away, you can see even in the winter, when the sun is in the least beneficial position for these panels, they are producing more power earlier in the day and later in the evening. It's not perfectly symmetrical because there's some slight shading that happens late in the day from the west side. The first thing I want to do is merge the results of the east and west panels together to produce the typical V-curve that you would expect to see from a vertical array. This assumes that you will face half of your panels east and half of your panels west. Now, it's pretty much obvious at this point that the vertical panels are not producing as much as the south-facing panels. No big surprise there. Adding this bar graph, you can see the full day production for each panel in watt hours. If I set the main array bifacial panels as the performance standard at 100% of the expected output for the day, you can see the standard panels fall below that at 93% of the max, and the bifacial vertical panels produce a very disappointing 63% of the max for that day. However, in my winter results video, I showed this chart, which is the total energy produced by one panel in each orientation for the whole month of January. For my January, which only had snow on the ground for 3 or 4 days, the combined output gives us 79% of the bifacials on the main array. Interestingly, only 7% less than the standard panels put out. I have to say that's better than I expected, but it's still not as good as a regular south-facing array. Now the big question was, as we move towards the summer solstice, are we going to see a different result? In the summer, the sun is rising actually north of east, so there's much more time as it comes across the sky for the east, and it sets a little to the north of due west, so the backside sees a lot more time. So my expectation was we'd get a lot better result in the summer. We don't have very many sunny days in Ohio, so I couldn't pick the exact summer solstice day for our reference point, which would be June 20th, but I got June 15th, which is really close. Right away, you can see a difference from the winter data with the much bigger shoulders in the morning and evening, where the vertical east-west panels are catching more of the morning and evening sun. However, when we look at the total energy for the day, the bifacial panels in the vertical orientation are still only producing 78% of the power that these 30-degree south-facing panels are producing. Much better than the 63% that we were seeing on a regular sunny day in the winter, but still the overall underdog. In the winter analysis, we saw some dramatic results with snow on the ground and snow on the panels. In the summer, our most interesting result is to compare to a cloudy day. In this chart, I've overlaid the 3 orientations on a mostly cloudy day, and right off you can see there's no dip in the middle of the day with the vertical panels. On cloudy days, the light is pretty much all ambient, and the orientation of the panels, north, south, east, west, vertical, makes very little difference. What does make a difference is whether or not they're bifacial. The bifacial panels can pick up sunlight on the front and the back, especially well on ambient days, which is what allows them to completely outperform the standard panels on cloudy days. Now you can see from the total daily energy chart that a bifacial panel in any orientation outperforms standard panels facing due south. This is probably a good time to mention that tariffs are increasing on imported solar panels, and those tariffs are expected to significantly drive up the cost of all solar panels. You can get more details on these tariffs from an article I linked in the description from PV Magazine. If you've seen many of my videos, you know I always recommend getting bifacial panels if you have a ground array. Now you can get bifacial panels assembled here in the US in Texas. This isn't an ad, they aren't sponsoring this video, but you can get bifacial panels that are Cirrus brand at 45 cents a watt through Signature Solar. Plus, you can get an additional discount if you use the exclusive code that I provided for you in the description. Speaking of sponsors, the sponsor for this video is you. These kind of videos with lots of analysis over long periods of time take a lot of resources. And if you find it valuable and want more of this content, consider hitting the super thanks button. Or you can use the donate link in the description to send me $5 or $10. The link goes through my website, projectswithdave.com, so I get your whole donation instead of YouTube taking a small percentage of it. Thanks for your support. Back to the data. You can see in this chart, a single solar panel on a sunny day in the summer produces exactly 3 times the energy that the same panel can produce on a cloudy day. So even though vertical panels perform very well on cloudy days, the total power for those days is very small compared to a sunny day. By adding the winter data to this chart, you can see how snow-covered days where the vertical panels were producing a whopping 200% of the output of the other panels, it's still a very small amount of the total energy relative to sunny days. So unless you have a lot of cloudy or snowy days, the really high performance of these vertical panels is going to be outweighed by the typical sunny day that you have throughout the year. And that's just not going to be enough to swing the overall results. Now, if we look here at the total power produced by one panel in each orientation for the 6 months from January to June, we get the full picture with all the cloudy, snowy, and sunny days combined. The south-facing bifacial panels beat everything as expected. The south-facing standard panels are 9% behind the bifacial ones, which is about 1% better than I expected. And the vertical bifacial panels come in a distant third with a 21% deficit. Now that doesn't mean vertically oriented panels aren't any good. There are many reasons why you might want to use them. It's all about using the right solution for your situation. For instance, you might be on a farm where land is a premium, and the vertical panels will allow you to still use virtually all of the land for animals or agriculture. Maybe you live in the north where there's heavy snowfall over much of the year. You may only have use of the side of a building or a fence row. These experiments give you a good idea of what you can expect in all of those situations. I'll continue taking data at least for a full year and bring you those total results, but I suspect it won't be much different than this half-year result. Many of you have been asking for a vertical north-south result to compare to, and my friends at SWI Fence Company sent me a few more posts so I can set up a north-south setup, so be sure and subscribe because there is more data to come on vertical panels. Now let's take a look at the reflection result. Now I know other YouTubers have shown some really amazing gains adding reflectors to solar panels. People send me links to those videos all the time. The problem is many of these test setups are not realistic. You can tune reflectors to direct the sun to a panel at any one point in the day and show really great results, but what's important is what happens after that. As the sun moves across the sky, those reflectors start to shade the panel. So unless you show an entire day's production or have a system that's moving everything to track the sun, those results really aren't valid. So for my test, I've set a reflector up and we'll get an entire day of data from sunrise to sunset without moving anything. That being said, every test has its limitations, and this one does too. Large mirrors are impractical for me to implement, so I ordered a large roll of Mylar and I attached it to some very large boxes. The fact that we have a very short row here and the mirrors don't extend indefinitely is going to impact the results to some extent. Ideally, I'd have a continuous row of panels with a continuous length mirror. Also, the mylar is not perfectly flat, so the reflection is somewhat distorted. However, I think this will give us a really good idea of how well a very large, clear reflector would work. In the world of experimentation, it's often better to iterate quickly towards a solution rather than taking a very long time to make a perfect test and then find out that it didn't work. I used some pallets to support my mirrors and set them at a shallow angle of about 20 degrees. This will reflect light towards the panels without blocking too much of the morning and evening sun. I don't have two sets of vertical panels that I can take data, one with mirrors and one without. So I had to use 2 days that were almost identical, which worked out really well actually. This chart shows the energy produced by each panel on the main array on May 12th and May 31st. I separated the bifacial panels from the standard panels because they can perform very differently depending on the ambient light conditions. From the chart, you can see the bifacial panels were up 1% from the 12th to the 31st, and the standard panels were down 1% from the 12th to the 31st. I don't think I could have asked for any 2 days more perfectly aligned for this test. Let's start with the morning performance. The 20-degree tilt on the mirrors slightly blocked the lower edge of the panels in the early morning, but that didn't seem to make a huge difference. You can see from this chart showing the total output of a single panel in each orientation from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. The bifacial panels on the main array are way outperforming the standard panels, which is what we would expect because the sunlight is actually hitting the direct backside of the panel. But the vertical panels with reflectors is blowing them both out of the water. I didn't expect that much gain early in the morning because of the shallow angle of the sun, but we're seeing a benefit even in the morning. The most important thing to understand is the whole day production result. And this chart shows the May 12th hourly production data for an average panel in each orientation. The east-west array has a dip in the midday, just as usual. Now, what we've all been waiting for. Does the reflector eliminate the dip? Well, here it is. The light blue curve is the vertical panels with reflection data from May 31st. We do see a significant improvement in the dip, but it isn't completely wiped out. Now, when I was running the test, I could see the reflection of the mirrors on the panels, and the bottom half of the panel was getting way more light than the top half. We're almost completely in line, just slightly to the east, and you can see the shape of my reflector on the panels. So it's not perfectly reflecting up. If this was a row of panels, it would be extended further to the left, and I might be getting a better, more even result. But, it's just proof of concept. Because of that, I think the results could be improved even further with a little bit of tuning of the angle and the size of the reflector. Also, there were some distinct hot points. I think that the mirror is a little too reflective. I think a surface that would diffuse the light a little bit would give us a better, more even result, especially considering very hot spots will locally degrade the cells, and that wouldn't be good for the overall panel life. Speaking of hot spots, I actually took several days of temperature data for the vertical panels and the main array, as well as some other panels around the property. And I got some very interesting results. I know a lot of you have been interested to know what the temperature difference is between these panels. Unfortunately, we don't have time in this video to go over it, but I already have the data and I'll bring it to you in a future video. We can get the realistic comparison for each option using the whole day production for an average panel in each scenario. From this chart, we can see a significant improvement adding the reflectors, but it still isn't as good as facing the panels due south. I can bring back my chart that shows the control data for the 2 days, showing how close in production they are, and then add in the single day production for the vertical array. Here you can see a distinct 8% jump in performance for the day with the reflector. I think with some tuning, we could easily get to 10% or maybe even better with the reflector performance. And 10% is actually very significant. And I've noticed installers are using reflectors, so they must be finding it worthwhile. So what have we learned so far today? Besides solar systems provide an endless opportunity for ways to optimize and configure your individual systems. Unfortunately, the reflectors did not completely remove the midday dip, but we learned a lot. Let me give you some pros and cons that I've discovered over the time of running these for vertical panels. One of the advantages of a vertical array is if you live in an area where you have low rates in the middle of the day and high rates in the morning and evening, this profile will very nicely match that and give you the best profitability for your system. However, if you're not in that scenario, they do produce less than a south-facing array overall. Now, I expect vertical panels will have a longer life because they have less direct exposure from the sun in the middle of the day. You get a little less power over time, but you also, I think, have longer lasting panels. One negative is it's going to be a little more expensive to install. There are a lot more solutions for angled racking systems than there are for vertical systems. One big advantage is if you live on a farm, for instance, you can use all of the space between the panels and not take up any of your farm real estate for animals or other agriculture. But there is a little more risk from wind exposure. These vertical panels take the brunt of every windstorm. If you live in the north, these vertical panels will be great for shedding snow, and you're likely to get a lot less hail damage if you live in the south and see a lot of big hail. One thing you have to be careful of is having enough ground clearance, whether it's for snow or for grass growing up underneath. And of course, the higher you get them, the harder it is to hang on to them in the wind. So that's something you have to balance. I do think you get fewer wasp nests since there's not a good ledge for them to hang under, but birds seem to like it better because you have this really nice vertical surface. I have hawks and everything else landing on here all the time, and so I get those bird droppings down the face of the panels, and that's not great. The reality is I get birds landing on my main array as well, so maybe that's not a huge difference. I plan to install a north-south version of this array right over here, because you asked for it, and SWI Fence Company was nice enough to send me a couple more posts so I can try it out. Also, if I can find the time, I would like to try some of the other suggestions in the comments. I would like to see what kind of gain I can get from using white rocks or a painted white surface, maybe reflection off of the white siding on my house, or even off the pond. So there are a lot of things to try. I found a local off-grid solar installer here in Ohio that loves experimenting as much as I do. Ed, the owner of Off-Grid Power Systems, and I are working together on some long-term testing with Hoymiles microinverters and integrating microinverters into Victron systems. His company has tremendous experience with Victron equipment. In fact, I spent a whole day there taking a class on installing and troubleshooting Victron equipment. He's not paying me to advertise for him, but I frequently have people asking if I know any reputable installers in my area. And I've worked with Ed enough to be able to recommend off-grid power solutions as a resource for you. I'll leave a link in the description, so if you live in Ohio or a nearby community and you're looking for an installer, you'll be able to check them out on their website. I get nothing if you use them. I'm just trying to help people out. If you didn't see the winter results, check them out right here. More data coming in the future. I have a lot of temperature data I've already taken, and I'm testing some new bifacial panels. Meanwhile, check out my website, projectswithdave.com. I have lots of projects and other valuable resources that will help you out with your solar installs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.